BBC News with Sue Montgomery. Tens of thousands of protesters have taken to the streets across Brazil to demand the impeachment of President Jair Bolsonaro over his response to the coronavirus pandemic. Brazil has the world's second largest COVID death rate. Nearly 500,000 people have lost their lives. These protests constitute the biggest anti-Bolsonaro movement since the pandemic began in Brazil. Here's our America's editor, Candice Piette.
Throughout the day, we've seen the size of the crowds in various cities just continuing to grow. In Rio de Janeiro, there was very large crowds with people holding up placards mourning the dead from COVID. And towards the afternoon, as the day begins to close, we've seen São Paulo, Brazil's largest city, and marchers there have packed the whole of the main avenue, which is 2.5 kilometres long from end to end. We're just seeing an enormous support there against President Bolsonaro.
The Colombian President Ivan Duque has extended the deployment of military forces to a quarter of the country's departments as anti-government demonstrations enter a second month. Mr. Duque said troops would help to arrest rioters and remove highway barricades. Will Grant reports.
2 months after the protests began, they're showing no sign of letting up. What started as an outpouring of anger over a proposed tax hike has now exploded into pitched battles in several major cities. Every day, peaceful protests soon descend into burning barricades and stone throwing, the authorities responding with tear gas and live rounds. The latest incident to enrage demonstrators was the sight of civilian gunmen shooting at protesters with the police. One man, an off-duty agent from the state attorney's office, was apparently lynched by an angry mob.
14 people kidnapped from a Nigerian university have been released. Unidentified gunmen abducted 20 students and 3 staff members from Greenfield University in Kaduna State last month. Mayeni Jones has more details.
There's been a wave of mass kidnappings of students in northern Nigeria in the past 5 months. But the abduction of students from Greenfield University stood out because unusually 5 of them were killed. Now the last of the abductees have regained their freedom. There are few details as to how this happened, but the authorities say those released were found beside a road connecting Kaduna to the capital Abuja on Saturday afternoon. The governor of Kaduna State has repeatedly said that he won't negotiate with kidnappers or pay ransoms.
Islamist rebels have mounted an attack on the town of Difa in southeastern Niger. The Ministry of Defence said a number of what it called terrorists were neutralised in the attack on Friday. Media reports say at least 4 security personnel and 4 civilians were killed. BBC News. President Biden has described as un-American a bill being debated by lawmakers in Texas, which would impose new restrictions on voting, similar to those recently adopted in Georgia and Florida. Mr. Biden called it an assault on democracy and said it disproportionately targeted black and brown Americans. The bill would make it harder to vote by post and would introduce stricter rules for election managers and voters. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has married his fiancée Carrie Simons in a secret ceremony at Westminster Cathedral in London. The wedding was held in front of close friends and family on Saturday. Helen Catt reports.
While there hasn't been any official confirmation from Downing Street, Tory MPs and others have been publicly congratulating the couple. They had been the first unmarried couple to occupy Downing Street. Boris Johnson and Carrie Simons, who is a former Director of Communications for the Conservative Party, became engaged towards the end of 2019. The couple have a son, Wilfred, who was born in April 2020. The lack of any official confirmation, while perhaps unusual, chimes with Mr Johnson's long-standing position of wishing to keep his personal life private. This is his 3rd marriage. He finalised his divorce from his second wife, Marina Wheeler, last year, making him the first Prime Minister in centuries to divorce and remarry while in office.
A Chinese cargo spacecraft has successfully docked with the space station core module, where it would deliver supplies, equipment and propellant. China's first orbiting space station, named Tiangong, meaning Heavenly Palace, is expected to be fully operational next year and will remain in low Earth orbit for up to 15 years. The English football club Chelsea have been crowned the best in Europe after beating Manchester City 1-0 in the Champions League final. It's the second time the London team has lifted the trophy after winning the accolade in 2012. BBC News.